Once the pawn structure in front of your opponent's king is destroyed, you should think about attacking. It should be at least on your mind. But how do you attack correctly without overstretching, and how do we attack without losing? Let's just dig deeper into this topic. Here in this position, we start with the basic thing, an evaluation. So we look into the material and then we see, okay, each side has 3 minor pieces, and these 3 minor pieces consist of 2 bishops and 1 knight here. Each side has a queen here and here, and the rooks. So the material is equal. Then we look into the center. How does the center look like? You see, both sides have control over the center. I would define the center as these squares. That's the modern interpretation of the center. So what really stands out, because if we look into things such as piece activity, we see, okay, the bishop on c4 is nice, the bishop on c5 is nice. So both sides have active pieces. The development of white is finished. Black is about to finish his development by playing something like bishop e6 or bishop g4. And then each side has to move the queen to connect the rooks, and then the development is finished. So what really stands out is the weakened kingside pawn structure of black. So not only is this pawn on f6 attacked here, but it is also pinned. So here black already has issues, and so my verdict here would be absolutely that white has an overwhelming advantage and white is playing for a win. The white side was played by one of my students, and he played a very nice game with a very important idea you should simply have seen, so you can use it on your own and win more games. Having said this, let's just look into the game. So here, it's very simple to come up with a good move for white. Just look into this black king side. It's damaged, the pawn structure is horrible, so white simply plays the very easy queen to d2, which is attacking this pawn. This is one of many ideas. There had been more subtle ideas, but queen to d2 is more than enough, I believe. So here, obviously, black needs to defend either king to g7 or king h7. And now pawn to c3. What's the purpose of this pawn? It's taking control of the d4 square, and it's opening up a couple of squares for an eventual bishop escape. We don't know if white will be forced to move his bishop, but just in case, it looks like the light squared bishop of white is a piece the white player wants to keep. So we make sure it can go back to c2 or d1. And far more important is the control over d4. And also white might threaten to play d4. So black is in a rather bad situation here. Bishop to g4 was played in the game. This is a very interesting move, and white can possibly just go knight to e1 and build up the attack. For example, king h1 and f4, opening up the f-file. This f6 pawn is horribly weak. It is attacked. It's true. It is defended. But the problem is, once the f-file is open, white can get as many attackers into the game as he wishes. The rooks, the queen, and possibly also the knight. Though getting the knight there is a little bit more difficult. Another very interesting idea for black had been simply bishop to e6. Why? White is trying to attack, so black should maybe try to exchange down some material. And generally speaking, when your opponent is attacking you, in many cases, it is not unwise to try to exchange the active pieces of your opponent. So here probably bishop to b5 looks nice, but now bishop g4, and you see here this bishop on b5 is less active than on c4. So we basically have the same position like in the game, with the difference that the light squared bishop of white is on b5 and not on c4. This had been interesting, if you ask me. At least the defensive task of black had been a little bit simpler, though probably still not really easy. So bishop to g4 was played, and in the game, not knight to e1 was played, but queen to e2. A very interesting move, just making sure that the queen is covering this knight, and white is trying to bring his pieces over to the king side, starting with the queen. So now queen to e7 was played, and I think this is careless play. Black should really recognize that his situation is severe. Black is running into a loss if he continues like this. So therefore, I believe queen to d7 had been more precise, giving up this pawn. So for example, bishop takes, and now rook to g8. And now you see interesting ideas. And why queen on d7? Well, later we would like to prevent pawn to h3. For here, it's not working anyway because of bishop takes h3, and here we have horrible threats against the king, and black is winning here. But just in case white tries to be clever and plays king h1 and later tries h3, in that case, let's say we play something random like what do I know, knight a5 for example, and they go h3 for some reason. Here we could already take on h3, and this looks very, very bad for the white player. Maybe he has some ideas with knight g5 and bringing the queen here, but white is surely not going to win this anymore. So this had been a very tricky setup, and white had been forced to solve some problems, some concrete problems. But here queen to e7, the queen keeps defending the pawn, but the queen is not active here, and generally speaking, a very difficult position for black to play. So now pawn to h3, and this is really a very clever move. It's not only forcing black to take a decision, to make a decision here. For example, taking is obviously not so good. This increases the pressure against the f6 pawn, and defending the f6 pawn is now nearly impossible unless you try to use the king, which is very, very risky. You don't want to do that, and that's just not good. So here, simply not good to go into this variation. So there's only one other idea left for black, and that's bishop h5 to keep the bishop. And now you see another problem. After pawn to g4, it looks like white is playing against that bishop on h5, against this light squared bishop of black, and trying to make it look less active, right? But actually, white has a very different idea in mind too. It's not just about putting that bishop on a very passive square where it is just attacking a defended pawn. So this bishop is basically a pawn. It's controlling this square, and attacking this one. So not a good piece. You don't want to have such a bishop, I guess. And now a move like a4 had been very interesting. It's setting up a trap. White wants to follow up with b4, a5, possibly trapping this bishop and winning the piece. And so let's just point this out. b4 and this bishop is lost after a5. There's no escaping square for that bishop. So black would need to play either a6 or a5 to control b4 and make a square for the bishop in case of a6, right? So here we could go bishop b6 and here bishop a7. The bishop is safe. The position is not great, but okay. What to do? We have to work with what we have. So in the game, a less precise move was played, and that's pawn to b4. But so why is it supposed to be less active? If we look into this position, something becomes very clear. White's pieces tend to be on the king side. If you look into this knight here, this bishop on h4, the queen, and maybe also the rooks will join later, as we will see. And the problem of black is his minor pieces, two out of three minor pieces are on the queen side when the king is about to be attacked. So naturally, you would like to bring over some pieces to defend, or try to exchange active pieces, create counterplay, whatever. You need pieces there, because they are not doing anything on the queen side. So here, white plays b4, which is attacking the bishop, that's correct, so the bishop moves back. And now pawn to a4. And I believe this plan is a little bit risky. Why? Because black can now play pawn a5, to save his bishop. This is more or less forcing pawn to b5 and now knight to d8. And you might think, okay, the knight on d8 looks like a super passive piece and it's not good whatsoever. But actually it is solving some of the problems. Now the knight can jump to e6. Solving some of the problems doesn't mean that black has a fine position. Black is far away from having a good position. This position is just horrible. But at least this knight is about to become active and maybe put some pressure on f4 at least and try to get it active, right? Because f4 is an outpost here. No white pawn would be capable of defending. The downside is that white doesn't have a hard time of exchanging it with this knight maneuver, knight e1, knight to g2, and he's controlling this very important f4 square, and black basically, still has the issues. But at least you give white a harder time. White needs to solve some problems, and when you force your opponent to solve some problems, there's always a probability that your opponent is going to make a mistake and let the advantage slip, or at least lose some portion of the advantage. And this is what black should be doing here. But instead of the active a5, black just went a6, which isn't forcing white to do anything. Now, white does need to play b5 and force the knight away here. Playing b5 here would be actually not so clever, right? You just exchange the pieces here, and of course, white is more active and everything, but I believe that black is coming closer to a holdable position. Yeah, so b5 would be horrible. a5 was played, and this again is a very strong move, pushing the bishop to a7 and putting it a little bit less active. And yeah, generally I like this move. Also, it's often a good move. a5 is a good move for endgames if we intend to go into endgames. And now a very clever move. Building up on this h3, g4 idea, king to h1 was played. What's the purpose? White wants to bring the rooks to the g file. He wants to get the pieces in. That's one of the ideas. Another idea would be getting in f4, and this wasn't possible with the king on g1, logically, because the f4 pawn, the f pawn here on f2 is pinned, so f4 wouldn't be possible. Pardon me, so king h1, and now queen to d7, and here we see black really has no counterplay whatsoever. Black is really struggling to find squares for his pieces. Black has less space. Black has okay central control, but black has this horrible kingside structure, and black doesn't have the coordination to defend the weaknesses on the kingside. So now rook to g1, and black is really not in a position to do anything here. So just imagine black is giving up this pawn here after queen to d7. White could have taken it, but white is saying, you know what, the pawn looks nice, but I don't need it because my attack is going to succeed anyway. So rook to g1 played, and queen to e7, because apparently, as we have pointed this out, black doesn't have squares or good squares for his pieces. Black is almost in Zugzwang. He must do some moves, but there's not really something he can do. So queen to e7, rook to g2. And this was clear. White plays rook to g1 to play g2 and bring the other rook to g1 and somehow prepare the push g5. Another very interesting idea, in my opinion, had been something like rook to f1, but this is far slower and giving black again time to do some knight d8, knight e6 idea, possibly. Yeah, getting control over g5 and f4 wouldn't be that nice. So white is doing a very good job by playing rook to g2. Rook to g8 was played, and now, as mentioned, white is doubling the rooks here. And after rook to d8, white plays queen to d2. This is not really necessary, especially considering the idea white is following, and which we will see in a moment. But it's absolutely playable, because black, again, doesn't have really something to play. Now the rook went from g to e8. And when I looked into this game the first time, I was puzzled. I was asking myself, okay, we have this nice attack, the weakened pawn structure of the black king side. And so what's the purpose here? How am I going to improve my position? I thought, okay, maybe I can just go bishop to bishop g bishop g3 and play an idea like this with potentially a rook on h2, or putting a rook on h2. But when I looked a little bit deeper, I found the move, but it took me some time. And my student played this move, pawn to g5. And it looks very paradox because actually black is covering this square twice with pawns, and then there's also the queen. Of course, white has a much better control over g5 if you look into it, but putting a piece or sacrificing a pawn there wasn't my initial idea, to be honest. I wanted to build up something with bishop g3 and h4 or f4 that should be enough to win the game. But g5 is just ending the game immediately, because now apparently black doesn't have a defense, believe it or not. So here black has two ways of taking. Black can take with the f pawn and black can take with the h pawn. And in both cases, white can choose which piece he's sacrificing. You can play knight takes g5, f takes g5, and then follow up with bishop takes g5. So you keep the bishop. And here black doesn't have a defense, because after f6 there's a very simple idea for white, and black doesn't have a defense here against this very strong rook lift. A very late rook lift, but yeah, in a attack. But far easier than this, I believe, is to take with the bishop. Why? When the bishop takes, the knight can recapture. And when the knight recaptures, black has a very weak king again. And the question is, where does black put the king? Let's say it goes to h8, then simply knight takes f7 check, and obviously taking with queen is losing the game instantly. It just loses the queen for very little material. And just to show you this, even if the queen is sacrificed, there's no way to recapture the bishop here because of queen h6. So the idea is just this mating attack. So queen h6 is already a mate. So now, okay, we know knight f7 check with the idea queen h6 is very, very brutal, and it's so king h8 is not working. What about king g7? Well, then we have a very nice idea, because we have some sort of x-ray. Here, if the knight is removed, the bishop would be pinned. So now, again, knight takes f7. This isn't even a check, but it's pinning this bishop on g7, and again, bishop on g6. And again, we have this bishop on c4, which is defending f7. So queen takes f7 again is not working. Here, bishop takes and completely winning again. So taking is not working, and it looks like my student's opponent figured this out and played queen to f8. And also this is obviously not going to be a sustainable solution, because after g takes f6, black is in a very horrible spot. Here there are mating threats everywhere, and black is going to lose here. Let's say black plays a zero move, something like bishop to d8, then there's already bishop takes f7. Queen takes f7 and rook takes g6. Here, this is nothing you want to keep playing. Knight goes here, and then we just make sure to get in maybe queen to g2, or you pick the way how you win the game, basically. You can also just improve your position move by move. That would work too. White is simply well coordinated, and black has big issues here. Black, yeah, very hard problems to solve. Also, knight to g4 is a very interesting idea. And keep in mind, h5 will never work because of queen to g5 check. And when the queen enters like this, the game is immediately over. So yeah, all these ideas are threats. Also, probably, I believe after bishop to b8, for example, we might even play rook takes g6 with an overwhelming attack here. Yeah, this just looks very, very deadly. Again, knight to h2 looks very promising with knight g4 in mind. And other ideas, also pawn f4, probably. Yeah, white is just much better coordinated, the black king is weak, and we have this incredible strong f6 pawn. So let's go back. In the game, rook to d7 was played, and here followed knight to h2, very strong. And for some reason, bishop h5 was played, and this is a mate in 2 after rook g7 check, king h8, and queen takes h6 checkmate. But let's go back and see. So here, knight to h2. What else could be done? The bishop to b8. Okay, now again we can take here because, however, black responds, black is simply losing because again this is not going to be enough, and white is completely dominating the board. A very, very horrible position for the black player. So let's summarize what we have learned now. So we started with this position with the weak pawns on h6 and f6, and white is already putting pressure against f6, and after queen to d2 we put pressure on h6 too. The pawn must be defended, and white just improves the position. Control over d4, bishop to c2 somehow would be a nice idea, especially after this bishop e6 idea. Somehow reroute the bishop, this, and then we just come back. We want to keep that piece. And after bishop g4, knight to e1 had been the most obvious move in my opinion. Queen to e2 was played, another good move. And here, queen e7, as we have discussed, this misses the idea that black should come up with some sort of threats, especially on the white king side. So here queen to e7, and here we can say that the game is basically over because after bishop g6, yeah, here after black missed the very important a5 idea here, which had guaranteed him to get knight d8 with an extra tempo. Yeah, then here there is nothing black can really do because if king h8 is strong enough, there's simply nothing that is working for the black player. You simply improve your pieces as white, and black can't do anything. There's no sort of counterplay whatsoever. Black is utterly lost, and here, after some moves, there came g5. By the way, the reason why I disliked queen to d2 is because you can play g5 here, and again, if it's taken, we take with bishop, maybe, and here we would be forced to watch out for these bishop h5 ideas. So don't take these things for granted. This bishop h5 idea again took me a while to see. I needed time to figure this move out. So if we play g5 here, probably knight takes, and now, this, f6, and again, we have very, very strong ideas with rook lifts. And it's basically a matter of choice of how you try to win this game with the white pieces here. Just go back to c1, and what is black doing here? His pieces are utterly passive, and there's not really something he can do. For example, this bishop to f7 and queen to e3 is very strong, threatening queen h6. So again, it was just a matter of choice. And before we finish this video, I want to know what you think. What was the rating of this student of mine? What's his over the board rating? Because obviously this was a classical over the board game. If you like attacking chess, then check out the description where I will link a couple of other instructive attacking games I have recorded. See you in the next video.